They believed the disaster was finished. They believed the sorrow had already touched its edge when Malcolm Jamal Warner's unexpected passing in Costa Rica sent tremors through Hollywood. But what happened afterward, no one was ready for. This is not simply another celebrity scandal. This is the sort of disclosure that slices through your soul, leaving you crushed, fractured, and desperate for clarity. Moments earlier, Tracee Ellis Ross did something that has left millions sobbing. With shaking hands and a voice weighed down, with anguish, she confessed a truth she had carried in silence for over a decade. Not only was she quietly wedded to Malcolm for 10 long years, but she also disclosed the secret that shifts everything we assumed we understood about his existence and his death. On her verified profile, she posted a picture not of herself, not of Malcolm, but of a teenage daughter, a daughter with Malcolm's identical eyes, the same grin, a likeness so chilling it felt like staring into the past. And beneath that image, a DNA report confirming Malcolm Jamal Warner as the parent. Her caption pierced deeper than any headline ever might. "You didn't just steal my partner. You tried to erase my family. Meet our child." Within minutes, the internet collapsed. Tears streamed, hearts crumbled, and a storm of anguish swept across the globe. This wasn't merely about money anymore. It wasn't merely about stardom or policies. This was blood. This was heritage. This was the reality Malcolm fought to defend. A reality now torn wide open for the entire world to witness. And tonight, one haunting question endures. If this hidden child was concealed for so long, what else was being concealed? The internet believed it had already seen the height of this disaster. Malcolm Jamal Warner's sudden passing was agonizing enough. A man adored by millions, gone too early in a distant land, leaving behind unresolved mysteries and a silence that felt heavier than speech. But Tracee Ellis Ross's disclosure, it didn't just reopen old scars. It ripped them wide apart, exposing something no one foresaw. Her admission that she had been Malcolm's hidden spouse for 10 years shook the pillars of Hollywood. Picture that. A decade of devotion, marriage promises exchanged behind closed doors. Anniversaries marked in the shadows, all concealed from the cameras, the tabloids, even the most merciless rumor chasers. For 10 years, she carried this fact like a ghost stalking her every step. And now, with Malcolm gone, the quiet could no longer stay. The timing alone made the world doubt everything. Just days before Tracee's disclosure, it was reported that Malcolm's first wife had already obtained a staggering $200 million life insurance windfall, wealth that was meant to safeguard the future of his heritage. But with Tracee stepping forward, the storyline shifted. Suddenly, she wasn't just Malcolm's mourning confidant. She was his widow. And in the sight of the law, that meant one thing. She was entitled to half. The world erupted. Hashtags surged within minutes. News agencies scrambled to revise headlines. Admirers rushed to her defense, calling her courageous, insisting she had been erased from the narrative by a system that never recognized her bond with Malcolm. Critics were ruthless, accusing her of greed, of picking the moment of deepest mourning to cash in on fortune and prestige. But even as the Globe argued, no one foresaw the second shockwave. And when it landed, it struck like a hammer. Tracee's post, that chilling portrait of a teenage daughter paired with a DNA file, didn't just break the internet. It pulverized it into countless shards. The girl's likeness to Malcolm was unmistakable. His stare, his grin, that same fire in her eyes that had once illuminated television screens across America. Social media users became self-made detectives overnight, digging up old pictures of Malcolm, matching angles, layering images, building side-by-side collages that went viral within hours. The DNA record, sealed and certified, was dissected by everyone from medical professionals to conspiracy believers. Some swore it was undeniable proof. Others claimed the timing was too suspicious, too flawless, as if staged to maximize shock right after the insurance payout. And then there was Tracee's caption. Honest, raw, heartbreaking. "You didn't just take my partner. You tried to erase my family. Meet our child." That one line ripped through millions of souls. Suddenly, the tale was no longer about insurance wealth or hidden unions. This was about a daughter, an innocent teenager who had been kept outside the spotlight for years, only to be hurled into global chaos in the aftermath of her father's passing. She hadn't wished for this. She hadn't spoken a syllable. Yet now, the entire world knew her image, her truth, and her ache. The internet divided into two merciless factions. On one side, the believers, those who saw the DNA, saw the similarity, and declared this was Malcolm's child without hesitation. To them, Tracee wasn't a manipulator. She was a mother battling for her daughter's rightful place in the heritage of a man who had meant everything to her. They praised her bravery, framing her as a casualty of a system designed to silence her and her child. On the other side, the doubters sharpened their blades. They accused her of playing a long, calculated strategy. They pointed to the timing, the fortune, the sudden public reveal after years of stillness. To them, this wasn't about devotion or justice. It was about power, a chess move crafted to rattle the empire and force her way into Malcolm's estate. Hashtags blazed worldwide. Chichina Tracee's truth. True Jamal's secret. Daughter. Chicha DNA reveals. All meme pages pumped out comparison shots, gossip outlets ran exclusive. Deep dives into Tracee's romantic history and conspiracy webs mapped out timelines like crime boards. Every corner of the internet was engulfed. But just when the world thought it couldn't descend any darker, another voice pierced the storm, one that carried more gravity than any trending Malcolm's mother. Sources close to the Warner family described her as enraged, heartbroken, and more resolved than ever. To her, this disclosure wasn't merely a betrayal of her son's legacy, it was the missing fragment she had been hunting for. In private exchanges, she reportedly told companions, "This alters everything. My son didn't just drown. He was silenced." Her words ignited the fire all over again. If Tracee's reveal had cracked open the story, Malcolm's mother's response poured gasoline onto it. She wasn't merely questioning the presence of a hidden daughter. She was questioning the very circumstances of her son's passing itself. For years, murmurs had circled about Malcolm's final hours in Costa Rica. Reports claimed he drowned, but the details never truly matched. Now, with this disclosure, his mother pieced the puzzle together differently. She believed powerful figures stood to profit from his death financially, personally, strategically. And now, with a child in the picture, those motives suddenly appeared darker, deeper, more menacing. The divide grew sharper. Supporters of Malcolm's mother said a grieving mother's instincts are seldom wrong. Critics said sorrow can distort the mind, shaping illusions where none exist. But one truth was undeniable. Once a mother begins asking dangerous questions, secrets have a way of surfacing. And the DNA report had already pushed the stakes into perilous territory. If it held up in court, Tracee's role shifted overnight. She wouldn't just be a concealed wife demanding her portion. She would be the mother of Malcolm's biological daughter, a child with full legal claims to his fortune, his legacy, his name. That altered everything. Legal analysts weighed in, predicting turmoil. The $200 million payout to Malcolm's first wife could be halted, re-examined, ripped apart in courtroom wars. Lawyers whispered about inheritance laws, contested estates, trial battles that could stretch on for years. With celebrities involved, millions at risk, and a hidden family suddenly revealed, this wasn't just a lawsuit. This was evolving into one of the most explosive Hollywood courtroom sagas of the decade. But beneath the uproar, the questions haunting everyone weren't about wealth. They were about intent. Why had this daughter been concealed for over a decade? Why had a marriage been kept in secrecy for so long in an industry where even the smallest rumors leak within days? Was it about shielding a child from the ruthless spotlight of fame? Or was it something far more dangerous? Something tied directly to Malcolm's death in Costa Rica? Because if Malcolm and Tracee could hide a daughter for this long, then what else had been buried? And as the internet spiraled, one truth became impossible to deny. The quiet, private world Malcolm once shielded so fiercely had been ripped wide open. Nothing could ever stitch the pieces back together again. The shock of the court's first ruling had scarcely settled when an even darker storm began to gather over Carmelo Anthony's life. If part 1 was about the devastating fall of his family's empire, part 2 was about the public disgrace that followed, the kind of disgrace no superstar could brace for. The headlines spread like wildfire. Anthony clan built fortune on lies. 30-mailer's mansion seized in murder fraud scandal. The press didn't care about respect. They only cared about blood, drama, and clicks. And Carmelo, the man who once stood on the pedestal of glory, was now being dragged through the dirt alongside his parents. Neighbors who once greeted the Anthonys turned their backs. Old companions stopped replying to calls. Even fans who once roared his name in arenas now whispered behind screens. Maybe Carmelo knew. Maybe he was part of it. That was the cruelty of the hour. It wasn't just his parents on trial, it was his spirit. Inside the courtroom, things turned nastier. Prosecutors painted his parents as architects of greed, people who didn't just make a slip, but engineered a scheme with chilling accuracy. They highlighted GoFundMe donations, showing clips of Carmelo's parents pleading for aid, while behind the curtains, they were spending thousands on designer outfits, luxury getaways, and that notorious $30 million mansion. And the proof didn't stop there. One FBI agent revealed stunning recordings, hidden phone calls where Carmelo's mother allegedly mocked the fools who donated money, boasting about how simple it was to play the sympathy card. The courtroom gasped. Reporters raced to tweet. Carmelo buried his head in his hands. Imagine being him in that instant, watching the two people who raised you, the two people you trusted most, being unmasked not just as liars, but as manipulators. It wasn't just fraud. It was betrayal wrapped in designer labels. But the worst was still ahead. Mid-trial, another shockwave hit. Prosecutors suggested that the murder accusations were tied to silencing a man who threatened to expose the fraud. A man who knew too much. Suddenly, this wasn't just financial scandal. This was survival and death. The notion that Carmelo's parents might have killed to protect their empire sent shockwaves through the nation. Every camera, every microphone, every gaze turned to Carmelo. What did he know? Was he covering for them? Was the basketball star's success secretly financed by blood money? The story spiraled out of control. TV analysts debated his fate. Endorsement contracts dissolved overnight. Fans began burning his jerseys on social platforms. The same hands that once cheered for him were now typing fraud, criminal, and disgrace. But the real devastation wasn't in the headlines. It was in the silence at night. Alone, Carmelo sat in his apartment, staring at photos of his childhood. Birthday parties, Christmas mornings, Little League games, every joyful memory was now tainted with suspicion. Were his parents smiling out of affection? Or was it all a performance, part of the same act played on the world? He remembered his father once telling him, "Son, in this world, you can't rely on anyone but family." And now that phrase cut deeper than any knife. Because if family was a lie, then what remained? In one of the most gripping courtroom days, Carmelo took the stand not as a defendant but as a witness. Journalists described him as shaking, voice-breaking as he struggled to speak about his parents without falling apart. He told the court, "I don't know who they are anymore. I thought they loved people. I thought they cared. But the things I'm hearing, I don't recognize them." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Even the judge looked shaken. Carmelo Anthony, one of the toughest men in sports, reduced to a son betrayed. That moment wasn't about basketball, or glory or wealth. It was about anguish. It was about the collapse of trust. And still, the avalanche kept coming. Social media began dragging not just his parents, but Carmelo himself. Rumors spread that he might lose everything: his contracts, his endorsements, even his chance at the Hall of Fame. Commentators asked, could the league allow a man so stained by scandal to remain its face? Then came the cruelest twist. Carmelo's own attorney warned him that he might face civil suits. Families who donated to his parents' fraudulent campaigns were now threatening to sue him personally, claiming that his name and fame helped legitimize the scam. The betrayal was absolute. His parents weren't just destroying themselves, they were destroying him. And just when people thought the case couldn't get more explosive, leaked footage hit the internet. A clip allegedly from inside the Anthony mansion showing Carmelo's mother arguing with his father, screaming, "If he ever finds out what we did, everything falls apart." The implication: Carmelo had been kept in the dark, but only because his parents feared his reaction. That clip spread instantly. Millions watched. Hashtags ignited. The narrative twisted yet again. Carmelo wasn't complicit. He was a casualty. The son of parents who had built a kingdom of deception around him. all while he chased his dream on the court. But was that enough to redeem him? Could the world forgive? Or would the scars of this scandal follow him forever? The trial wasn't finished. More witnesses were waiting, more secrets waiting to erupt. And Carmelo, trapped in the center, faced the most crushing truth of all. No matter what the verdict declared, his life as he knew it was finished. The mansion, the legacy, the trust and family destroyed. This was no longer only a case about fraud or murder. This was about betrayal on the deepest level. A son abandoned not by death, not by absence, but by the choices of the very people who gave him breath. And the world couldn't look away. The courtroom sat in silence, the air so heavy it felt like even a murmur could splinter the moment. Carmelo Anthony's parents, once pillars of pride in his life, stood before the judge, their faces pale, hollow, and etched with a shame that words could never fully convey. But the true storm wasn't just in the courtroom. It was in Carmelo's soul, tearing him apart piece by piece as the truth seeped out like venom. The prosecution's final words landed like a hammer. This was not just a crime. This was a betrayal. A betrayal of trust, of kinship, of community, of everything this young man built his reputation on. They took what was not theirs, and they did it under the shadow of Carmelo's triumph. The cameras zoomed in, flashes firing, capturing every instant for the world to devour. Social media erupted in real time. Carmelo family scandal. Justice for the victims. 30 million mansions seized. It wasn't just news, it was a global circus. A nightmare broadcast live for millions. Carmelo's jaw locked as he watched his mother tremble, tears sliding down her face. He wanted to run to her side to shield her from the world's scorn, but he couldn't. Not this time, not after everything. His father, once his greatest role model, couldn't even lift his eyes to meet his son's stare. That single detail wounded Carmelo more than any headline ever could. When the judge's gavel came down with a thunderous crack, the sentence was delivered. Years in prison, assets seized, reputations obliterated. The $30 million mansion gone. The money raised through lies gone. The life Carmelo thought he knew shattered beyond recognition. The courtroom erupted. Some cheered for justice. Others gasped in shock. Reporters rushed to the exits to deliver breaking alerts, their voices quivering with the weight of history unfolding before their eyes. And in the center of it all, Carmelo sat paralyzed, unable to move, unable to breathe. Outside, the streets turned into a frenzy. Protesters carried posters. Deception is still deceit and fairness for the families. Meanwhile, loyal fans stood with Carmelo shouting, "He's not his father, don't blame Melo." The clash of voices formed a storm of disorder that police fought to control. But the darkest moment came when Carmelo walked outside those courthouse doors. Microphone pressed into his face. Journalists screaming over each other. One question struck harsher than the rest. "Carmelo, do you forgive your parents?" His lips quivered. His eyes flamed red. And for the first time, the superstar who had endured some of the toughest arenas in the NBA broke down, murmuring only two words, "I can't." That footage spread instantly. Within minutes, it had millions of clicks, millions of reposts. Fans argued, analysts examined, psychologists reflected. Some called it pure honesty. Others branded it betrayal against his own kin. But no one could dismiss the sheer devastating humanity of that instant. At night, Carmelo sat lonely, gazing at old pictures, birthdays, Christmas nights, family trips, snapshots of a time when everything felt so flawless, so secure. He gripped one frame tightly, murmuring through sobs, "Why? Why did you do this?" The mansion that once stood as a monument to their triumph now sat hollow, its gates locked, windows dim. Neighbors murmured about the climb and crash they had seen just nearby. It turned into a spectacle overnight, people driving past just to capture images of the place where the FBI stormed in and destroyed a family forever. And yet, the emotional wreckage was only starting. Carmelo's sponsorships began to crumble. Brands detached themselves, issuing stiff statements like, "We support Carmelo, but cannot be linked with this continuing scandal." Headlines shouted from NBA icon to family disaster. The burden was crushing. Friends close to Carmelo revealed he hardly spoke anymore, spending hours closed away, drowning in quiet. He's trapped in the storm. One insider confessed basketball doesn't even matter to him right now. He's just trying to endure the agony. But in the middle of this downfall, something surprising happened. Letters started to arrive from admirers, from strangers, from people who had endured their own family betrayals. Thousands of notes filled with words of solace, reminding Carmelo that he wasn't abandoned. One message stood out. You don't have to carry their guilt. You're still our champion. Don't let this break you. That letter, handwritten and quivering with honesty, ignited something inside him. For the first time in weeks, he lifted his chin, wiped his tears, and murmured to himself, maybe I can rise again. But forgiveness, that was another struggle. Could he ever forgive the people who brought him into this world, yet destroyed it with their own greed and lies? Could he ever step on the court again without the burden of this scandal pressing down on him? The final chapter of this tragedy wasn't just about prison terms or confiscated mansions. It was about a son staring at the wreckage of everything he once trusted, forced to rebuild his identity from the ruins. As the world watched, one thing became obvious. Carmelo Anthony's story was no longer just about basketball. It was about heartbreak, betrayal, and the crushing cost of trust shattered forever. And as the credits rolled on this chapter of his life, the question echoed louder than ever, not just in his soul, but in the hearts of millions who followed every moment of this downfall. When family betrays you this deeply, how do you ever recover? Imagine standing in the remnants of a dream you thought would never crumble. That's where Carmelo Anthony is right now. The world once saw him as a symbol of triumph, of hope, of a boy who rose from nothing to become a legend. But today that image lies in fragments. His parents, the very people who built that foundation, stand accused of the unimaginable. Their $30 million mansion seized, their names dragged through the dirt, their legacy forever tarnished. And Carmelo, he's left in the eye of a storm he never invited, carrying the unbearable weight of shame, betrayal, and sorrow. And here's the reality. This isn't just a scandal. This is devastation. In real time, a family once celebrated is now dismantled. A star athlete who brought joy to millions is now forced to wipe away tears in solitude. Can you imagine being him? Walking into a courtroom where cameras flash like lightning while whispers of murder and fraud ring in your ears. No fame, no trophies, no fortune could prepare him for this. This is raw anguish. This is human destruction. And it cuts deeper than any wound the public has ever witnessed. But the question that lingers, the one none of us can escape, is this. Where does Carmelo go from here? Does he collapse under the weight of this betrayal? Or does he rise stronger than ever, carrying not just his career, but the heavy shadow of his parents' downfall? One thing's certain, this is not the conclusion of the story. It's only the beginning of a saga that will haunt headlines for years. And as shocking as it is right now, the truth may only grow darker. Stay tuned because the storm has only just started.